call black everything. Everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back, black.
Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal, and we are joined today by the always beautiful and the always brilliant Dyana Williams, longtime music and radio industry veteran. She is the co-host of Soulful Sunday with Derrick Sampson in Philadelphia's WRNB Old School 100.3. She is widely regarded as the mother of Black Music Month, and we'll talk a little bit about that. How are you doing today, Dyana?
Mark, I am delighted to be with you today. I'm in exceptional form today. I just had a grandbaby.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm floating. I'm in baby bliss.
So I want to start by just talking a little bit about your career. You know, you're a New Yorker. You get started in radio in the 1970s. Talk a little bit about your trajectory, how you decided to get into radio.
Well, Mark, I actually wanted to be a musician. I studied flute with the great Jimmy Heath at the Jazzmobile program at IS 201 in Harlem, which is where I grew up as a teenager. And so my father was a music lover, always heard music in the house. It was either WABC, The Good Guys, and then it was WWRL. AM radio, of course, in the late 60s, early 70s was the rage until FM radio came into existence in the 70s, early 70s. And then I heard Vi Higginson, who was on WLIB-FM, which later became WBLS, Frankie Crocker. And she was the woman who inspired and motivated me to pursue a career in radio, on air.
And you know, you have that wonderful radio, that warm radio voice. I mean, it almost seems like it would have been a very natural fit. You get your start at WHUR, Howard University's radio station. Talk about what Black radio was like during those days. I mean, it's still a moment, it's almost apartheid-like. You know, there's still, you know, very clear distinctions between pop radio and what Black radio is. You know, what did Black radio look like in the early 70s?
Well, early 70s, Black radio made the transition from AM, being an AM-dominated factor in communities across the country, to the advent of FM radio. In the very early 70s, I'd say 71, 72, FM radio started really coming in full force. I was hired at WHUR on the eve of my 19th birthday in 1973, and it was a happy moment because I had dropped out of college. I went to City College in Harlem. I had to borrow Greyhound money from my mother to go to DC for the interview with Bob Nighthawk Terry, who was very popular in the film Talk to Me. He was a gentleman who reached out to me, who interviewed and hired me at 96.3 WHUR. FM radio at that time, Mark, was fabulous. We played 360 degrees of the total experience in Black music. So what that means is 1 minute I would play Miles Davis on the corner, and I would come back with George Clinton, throw in a little Nikki Giovanni, some Gil Scott-Heron. You would hear Walter Hawkins. It was everything, and it was kind of genre-less. We expanded beyond boundaries. We weren't one thing. We were not monolithic. And we had freedom to program our shows. That was in the early 70s when I started in radio. Very different these days.
You know, I was fortunate also growing up in New York City, and Frankie Crocker is one of the people that I loved listening to. I mean, I got exposed to so many forms of not just Black music, but just a wide array of music, you know, based on the kind of things that Frankie Crocker would play. You had the chance to work with the late Mr. Crocker, you know, in the mid-1970s. Talk a little bit about that experience.
Frankie Crocker started courting me while I was on the air at WHUR. One day I got a call on the hotline, and it was Dyana Williams. I was like, yes. He's like, this is Frankie Crocker. I almost melted because he was an icon and remains so in radio history, not just Black radio, but he certainly made a difference in the formats of Black radio stations all across the country. So first he offered me a job in St. Louis. That fell through. Then he offered me a job in Chicago. That also fell through. And then he called me and he says, I need you here in New York with me. And of course, I said a quick yes. Didn't know about the money, anything. It was home. I was anxious to go back home and be able to have my parents, family, friends, the people I went to college with, hear me on the radio every day. And that's what happened. I am a proud graduate of Frankie Crocker. In fact, I want you to call me Dr. Williams from this point on, Mark.
You're watching Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We are joined today by the legendary Dyana Williams, who is currently the co-host of Soulful Sunday with Derrick Sampson, Philadelphia's WRNB, Old School 100.3. You talked about the relative freedom, that folks had in the early 70s. I mean, again, when you talk about WBLS and inner city broadcasting, I mean, this is almost the apex of what we think of before, things like Radio 1, of independent black media, right? That was also politically connected in certain kind of ways. You're talking about a corporation that's owned by Percy Sutton, who was Malcolm X's counsel. I mean, it's amazing period. You've had a chance to kind of ride the wave of black radio to this particular moment where, let's just say, there's much less freedom. Do you think that has had an impact on the kinds of what's the word I want to use, recognition of the genius of black expression on the one hand, but also, young folks being able to hear that there's so much more for them to hear other than, the standard R&B and hip hop that we hear on so many urban stations these days?
Well, I have lived long enough and been on the air consistently for 41 years. I just celebrated my 41st anniversary in November of 2014. And what I have seen is the dismantling of black radio. And I do work for Radio 1. It is a publicly traded company founded by Kathy Hughes and run by her son, Alfred Liggins. However, what I've witnessed, though, is the corporatization of African-American music and radio. And also, it's just, I would say it's been diluted tremendously. I have an exceptional show with my partner, Derrick Sampson, where I'm pretty much free to play what I'd like to play. But I'm playing old school music, so I'm not playing anything new. And I love new music. I love the traditional foundational music, but I'm also very interested in what this generation of artists are producing, creating. And some of it is exceptional. Some of it is good. Some of it is really, really bad. I just think black radio is, it's an SOS situation. Yeah. We need some fixing, seriously. And we need people who are culturally sensitive and mindful of the foundation of the artists that have gone before, and very aware of the artists that are making qualitative music worthy of the ears of listeners. So that's my big gripe with black radio today. I think terrestrial radio, as we've known it in the past, is being dramatically impacted by the internet. People have choices. You can listen to Pandora, you can listen to Spotify, you can listen to Sirius XM. So it has negatively impacted radio overall, and my area, specifically black radio.
You talked about, being excited about some of the young folks out there. And, I saw your Facebook photos, you at the Jasmine Sullivan listening party, a few days ago. Talk about some of the current artists that do excite you, that you feel are working kind of within a tradition that speaks well of the folks that you folks got to hear on the radio back in the 70s and the early 80s.
Well, I tend to like a lot of the independent artists like Eric Roberson, Carol Riddick, people who may not be as well known and have names that are
Philly people.
But these are people, and they're Philly people. Well, Eric Roberson, Jersey, Howard graduate, don't hate Duke. But I also am very enamored of the new Tiana Taylor album. She's an R&B artist, but I love the music that she's doing. There are pockets. My full-time endeavor, aside from radio and television, is celebrity coaching. And I work with a lot of artists in this current generation of releasing records in all genres: EDM, heavy metal, pop, rock, R&B. I must tell you this, Mark, because I caught you recently on the Huffington Post Live with Laia, and you guys were talking about the new D'Angelo album. D'Angelo is my very, 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 very best friend, and I'm very proud of his album. And I think that it's refreshing to have that foundational type sound heard in the 21st century. And that's part of why the album went #1 globally, because people are hungry for real musicianship, creative artistry, Even though you can't necessarily understand all the lyrics because that's part of Dee's style,
Right.
thank goodness that we can read them. They were very insightful, poignant, meaningful, and of these times. I would say that the new D'Angelo album, Black Messiah, is our what's going on in many ways. Marvin Gaye released that album in 1971. But like I said, I like new artists, and I'm excited about hearing real music from people like Dee.
You're watching Left of Black. We're joined today by Dyana Williams, longtime radio veteran, classic voice, the always brilliant, the always smart. You mentioned Marvin Gaye's What's Going On and connecting that to D'Angelo's Black Messiah, you know, as kind of the soundtrack for this Black Lives Matter moment. But you have a deeper relationship in terms of Philadelphia soul music with another entity that has produced classic soul music, particularly within the context of social commentary, in terms of Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, and of course Philadelphia International Music, the great Tom Bell. Talk about the legacy of Philly soul music, you know, besides those wonderful children and grandchildren that you have.
Gamble is my ex, and we just, as I mentioned at the outset of our conversation, we just had our first grandbaby, Luke Gabriel Gamble. I am a humongous fan of the work of my ex, his partners, Leon A. Huff and Tom Bell. The sound of Philadelphia is not as celebrated as, let's say, Motown
yeah.
or Stax, the Memphis sound. However, the music that Gamble and Huff created along with Tom Bell. We're talking about People Make the World Go Round, Wake Up Everybody, No More Sleeping in Bed, Ship Ahoy, For the Love of Money, Family Reunion, songs with commentary and narratives that, to me, accurately described the feeling of Black folks, how we love, how we ache, how we aspire, how we lead, how we grow and develop. And all of that was inherent in the body of work that they created. I love the music of Gamble and Huff. It has been sampled. It continues to be sampled by this generation of artists in all genres, white folks, Black folks, rappers, everyone. So I'm very proud that songs that were substantive back in the 70s and 80s remain so in the 21st century.
Do you think we see another company and individuals like Gamble and Huff and Tom Bell with the kind of vision, you know, both in terms of talking about their collaborative work? I mean, as important as the recordings were, you know, what they did with Mighty 3 Publishing, you know, was also incredible visionary in terms of building this publishing company. You know, do you think we see that again in the future?
I think it's, you know, as you asked the question, I was pondering who is that label? Who are those producers who I can't off the top of my head rapidly cite? Salaam Remi has a label. But when we're talking about the social consciousness that Gamble and Huff and Tom Bell engaged in, I don't really see that. I don't hear it with any particular record company or producer entity production company that solely focus on consciousness music, much like Curtis Mayfield or Donny Hathaway. It's kind of sad and troubling, isn't it, Mark?
It is.
Yeah, there are pockets of people who do songs like Common. Congratulations to Common, Ava DuVernay, John Legend. They just won a Golden Globe for a song for the Selma soundtrack. So, like I said, pockets here and there, but in terms of a record company, can you tell me one?
Yeah, be hard pressed.
Okay.
I'm going to put you on the spot now, Dyana. You know, so Chris Rock just had this film, Top 5, and part of it revolves around who his top 5 favorite rappers are. So I'm going to ask you 2 top 5 questions. The first one is your top 5 radio jocks.
Oh, top 5 radio jocks. Frankie Crocker, Vi Higginson, Gary Bird, Hal Jackson, who was my mentor as well, the great Hal Jackson. And the 5th one, right? I'm thinking very carefully about my last thought, Mark. That's serious. You know who else I admire tremendously? Pat Prescott. She's on the air in LA. She has been on the radio consistently almost as long as I have been. She has a soothing voice, a great approach. But can I add Melvin Lindsay in there?
Oh, absolutely. The late Melvin Lindsay, right. The Quiet Storm.
Melvin Lindsay, was my protege. He was a student at Howard University. Kathy Hughes handpicked him, and worked and massaged very carefully to develop The Quiet Storm. So wait, Kathy Hughes, I gotta put her, even though she's not on the radio right now, she was for many years. She founded Radio One. She is my most admired figure in radio, because I remember when she said, I have a dream to own a radio station. And then she had a dream to hire and employ over 1,000 broadcasters. She's exceeded her own aspirations. Yeah. So Kathy Hughes is on that list too. So I kind of I made it top 7. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Top 7.
So this one might be more difficult. Your top 5 R&B and soul artists.
My top 5 R&B and soul artists: D'Angelo, Marvin Gaye, Curtis Mayfield, Minnie Riperton. I love Come to My Album. It's my favorite.
And so you still got this 5th choice here.
I know.
And let's keep in mind that you know most of these folks. If they're still walking the earth, you still know them. So, you know.
Wow. Teddy Pendergrass, who was my best friend until his death. Today is the anniversary of his interment, or passing, yes. 5 years is just amazing. And so I put Teddy on that list as well, because no one brought it like Teddy. He brought the church. Yeah. He brought the smooth tip. He brought the sexy. He brought something. He was the first African-American artist to have 5, 6 successive platinum albums in a row. Right. So I've got to put Teddy on my top 5 list. But yes, Curtis Mayfield, Marvin Gaye, D'Angelo, Minnie Riperton, and Teddy. That's hard. That was hard, Mark. That was very hard.
Well, I've always known you're a woman of great taste, and of course, both of your lists are further examples of that. We've been joined today by Miss Dyana Williams, who is a longtime radio industry veteran, stints at WHUR in Washington, WBLS, where she worked with Frankie Crocker. Currently, she's the co-host of Soulful Sunday with Derrick Sampson on Philadelphia's WRNB Old School 100.3, and widely regarded as the mother of Black Music Month. Thank you for joining us today, Dyana.
Oh, Mark, it's my pleasure. I admire the work that you're doing, not just on the academic level, but just overall to preserve, perpetuate our culture. You have a strong, reasonable, sound perspective on our culture, and I am grateful to you for upholding it. June is Black Music Month. I want to encourage people not just to focus during June, but every day. Don't buy bootleg, buy music, go to concerts, buy the merchandise of the artists that you support, teach your children about artists from back in the day that your grandparents and their parents listened to. Let us continue to support one of America's greatest exports and creations, music that is indigenous to our country, and that is Black music. Thank you, Mark, for having me.
Thank you, Dyana.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything,